I hope that I just read the two longest chapters of Candide as part of the videos for tomorrow and Wednesday. And I know I just read one of my favorite things that I have ever read. I it was referred to in the let's see what it's called, American Troubadour, which is a biography of Irving Berlin that I'm reading, and I was so intrigued. Irving Berlin wrote a song based on it that I will also look up eventually, but I was so intrigued by the original thing that I looked it up, found the most reliable text source that I could find of it, and I read it to the internet, and I really enjoyed doing so. And there will be a video, a link, probably here or here, at the end of this video to that video. It is 5 minutes long. It's pretty wonderful. So please check it out. Today, on the last night, I should say, I watched 3 episodes because I won't be doing this for next Monday, and so I had to do 3. One of them, the Are You Afraid of the Dark episode that scared me more than any other. That's the first one, Tale of the 13th Floor. After that, the Dream Machine, I may have been familiar with, and I've got a particular thing to say about that. And Dark Dragon, I have absolutely no memory of. So it's possible I only actually saw a few episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark, and they are sprinkled throughout the 5 seasons, but we'll see. So 3 today, 3 on Thursday, none next Monday, and then 2 next Thursday, and let me just look. And the Tale of the Frozen Ghost will be one of those, where Clarissa explains it all. So, the Tale of the 13th Floor starts with a bit of a theatrical thing, and it's not a Kristen story, it is a Betty Ann story, but there's a little bit of theatricality at the beginning of it, and Kristen is naturally part of that. Let's see, it's Kristen, Betty Ann, and one of the guys, I don't think it's Eric. It's one of the guys whose names I don't know. It's not Gary, it's not Frank, it's not Eric. There's one other guy, and I haven't learned his name yet. But I've learned quite a few of their names, the Midnight Society people. But anyway, they're standing in a row, they've got flashlights, they're aiming the flashlights at others, aiming them at themselves, and they ask the question, do you ever feel like you're being watched? Which is a very meta question to ask on a television show. Of course, they don't know that that's what they're doing, but yes, they are being watched. And then they go into, is the person next to you really who you think they are? And that's a creepier question. What don't you know? That sort of thing. So they go into the story. It's Betty Ann's story, and I wrote down all the characters' names this time. So I know that Karen and Billy are the brother and sister who live on the 12th floor of a building, but they like to go up to the 13th floor, which has been abandoned for a long period of time, and they like to play hockey. Karen is not very good at it. Billy is excellent at it. This is a theme of their relationship. He tends to be better at things than she is. The elevator operator, Gus, I believe is his name, tells them that the previous tenants of the 13th floor disappeared, so it's a mysterious thing we've established. And Karen says, maybe my real parents were klutzes like me. They discuss how she's adopted, so we get that detail. And then they go back to the elevator, and Gus isn't the friendly old elevator operator. He's not there anymore. It's this creepy tall guy who looks a lot like Count Orlok from Midnight Madness, because it's the same actor, named Leonid, which I believe is a meteor shower that I enjoy watching sometimes, who tells them that Gus had to take a break and he's the new elevator operator. They say, oh no, we'll take the stairs. We don't like the looks of you. And they go back downstairs, and then in the middle of the night, in Karen's room, she's got this TV, and it turns on, and it starts talking to her, and she says she must be dreaming, and the TV says, no, you'll see. You're not dreaming. This is real. You will see. You will understand. Stuff like that. Creepy stuff. The next day, she receives an invitation to the 13th floor where a toy company has moved in overnight, and she's not sure she wants to go. But then the next night, the guy's on the TV again, and he's on every channel. She tries flipping the channels, and he's still there. And I wrote down a quote. We only need. Oh, yeah, that's for later. But the TV says basically, you should do the thing that you were invited to do. You really should. And so she says she wants to, but only if Billy will come with her. And they both arrive, and everyone keeps saying the invitation was only for one. We only need one. And that's something that you never want to hear in a situation like this. I wrote down that the set for the 13th Floor Toy Company thing was Nickelodeon's practice run for the set for Space Cases. And they say they only need one, but the first game that they say they want to test is set up for 2 players. And so Billy sits across from her first. Billy's doing well. And then, not Leonid, this guy didn't write down his name. For some reason, I think it's Frank. The woman's name is Olga. I thought it was Orga, but Olga. And she looks like Flo from the Progressive commercials. But this guy, he starts turning a dial. And as he turns the dial, Karen gets better at the game. It's a coordination game. And Billy gets worse and gets sluggish and eventually kind of falls over and faints on the surface of the thing. So then she moves on to the next level, which involves sitting in a chair, and it's kind of a roller coaster chair. The sort of thing comes down over her instead of a traditional seatbelt. It's a bar comes down over her, and then she apparently has the power to point at a little plush ball and move it around with her mind. And the guy says, we're going to stimulate parts of your mind you've never used before, which is, again, a very creepy thing, but that's the point of Are You Afraid of the Dark, is to be creepy. But I don't know that kids watching Are You Afraid of the Dark back in the day would have known just how creepy that line actually is. So she moves the ball with her mind, and then the guy starts explaining the atmospheric pressure of home is good for you, bad for him. And then the guy takes his face off, and he's a completely blank, like the head of a thing that you'd put a wig on. And that is creepy. But then the chair starts rising off the ground toward a hole that appears in the ceiling, and this is where I had nightmares, because through the hole that appears in the ceiling, a bunch of people with mannequin heads and kind of 3 fingers, but then they also have a little digit sticking out of the side of their hand, start reaching down towards her to try to grab her and bring her up. And she manages, through her newly developed telekinesis, to turn that function off, make the chair stop moving, deactivate the guy, and get out of the chair. And now she's got to figure out how to get Billy out, because Billy has collapsed, and she also doesn't want to be running around too much in sight of the weird things that she's trying to escape. But she... the guy who turns out to be a robot, and he's remote controlled, and she eventually uses that against him. He looks like he's almost Steve Buscemi. It's not Steve Buscemi, but he's almost Steve Buscemi from in the looks department, to give you an idea. So let's see. She makes her way around through the ventilation, and eventually figures out that she can turn the dial the opposite way, turning down the home planet pressure that these otherworld things have been trying to turn the atmosphere into more like the planet, their planet. And as she does that, Billy wakes up, and she uses the remote control to make the robot grab onto Olga to make sure she's not a problem. And then they've been saying this whole time, we only have so much time before we have to leave the planet. They've only got so much atmosphere. And so we start to hear a countdown, the spaceship is going to take off. But then Count Orlok, Leonid, he comes out of the elevator and says, "You're making a mistake. You have to come with us. Leave him here. Come with us." And she says no. And she and Billy escape because Leonid has to go and catch the spaceship. So then, Billy and Karen are both thinking about the adventure they've just had. They are in her room. TV comes on, and it's a blank mannequin face, but it's Olga's voice, and she explains that that they had left her accidentally on the planet Earth many years ago, 10 years ago, and that they had returned to get her, but it'll be 10 years now before they can come back again, but they hope that now she understands that she has to go home. And during this time, after the video, the TV plays, we have a shot of Billy and Karen, and it zooms in on Billy slowly, and he says, "Wow, that was weird. I wonder what that's all about." And then it zooms out, and the actor who plays Karen has been replaced by a mannequin with the mannequin face. And this episode really, really freaked me out. I had the first nightmare that I have real memories of was of faceless aliens in the style of this episode. So that's why the 13th Floor holds a special place in my heart among Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes. So Dream Machine. This is a cool one. It raises a couple of questions about the Midnight Society themselves. So Kiki is telling the story, and she has laryngitis. So she asks Gary to read the story that she has typed on her typewriter, and she still gets to say the whole submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society thing. But he, does the narration. But she brings the typewriter with her, and typewriters are very heavy, and she carried it through the woods to their meeting place. So this is devotion to the bit. But she has laryngitis, so she can't speak very well. And the story itself is about a typewriter. Sean and Jennifer and the other guy, his name is, I wrote down, Billy. We have another Billy. So, but the main character is Sean, and he is a writerly person, a dreamer, and he has a crush on Jennifer, who considers him just a friend. So they are assigned to write 2-page stories by their English teacher, who is first seen to be eating a donut in class. And I'm just going to get out of the way what I'm going to say about her. My main takeaway from this episode about her, and how we judge certain things from other times. I haven't been saying which episodes I've been watching on Paramount Plus and which I've had to find elsewhere because they were banished for reasons of some kind of impolitic element. Mostly racially insensitive content within the episode. So they have some standards there. But Paramount Plus is perfectly willing to host the episode where they make fun of this woman for 20 minutes for being fat. When they're trying to find her later in the episode, they literally have the line, "Where else would she be other than her classroom?" The first place they go is the kitchen. They pick up a cinnamon bun type thing that she took a bite of and then put back down and said, "She was here." And so it's all well and good if they don't want to do the racially insensitive stuff, the black kid doing voodoo, for instance, or Sardo, but is it not at least of a similar vein to make fun of this woman for being fat for 20 minutes? But anyway, she otherwise seems to be, well, a comically lazy teacher. So, whatever. So anyway, she assigns them to write 2-page fictional stories. And the weirdest thing in the episode is, at the very beginning, apparently the stairs to Sean's bedroom, he and Billy's his best friend, they're going back to his house. Stairs to his bedroom are closed for some reason. But Billy says, well, let's walk up them anyway. And as he walks up them, they find out that the reason is the steps are bad, and he steps through one, and they find a hidden little room where they find this typewriter, and they find the papers of James Ellington, an author of yesteryear, and apparently his typewriter. And they think, well, why was all this stuff hidden? But Sean's like, oh, it's a typewriter. You can write stories on this, and he likes to write stories. By the way, this kid, we first see him as it's being established that he has a crush on Jennifer. He is wearing a nice floral tie. She's wearing a vest. I guess this is the early 90s, but still marking them as my kind of people. But I don't know, was that sort of thing common in high school classrooms at this time? So they find and Sean brings the story up to his room, where he starts typing out not the story, not the assignment, but just a fantasy that he has concerning Jennifer, not anything that wouldn't be aired on Nickelodeon. Basically, it's the Halloween dance, which he, I guess, wants to ask her to. This episode aired in July, so it wasn't Halloween time at the time. But she's at the dance. He arrives as Dracula, as a real vampire, and this was pre-Twilight, and they dance together and they have a good time, and then they end up out by the lockers, and she thinks he's going to kiss her, but his fangs appear, and he goes to take a bite of her, and while he's typing, she is at home sleeping and dreams what he's typing. Dream Machine, the tale of the Dream Machine. So he, of course, doesn't know that she dreams it, and he then goes on to, while Billy is sleeping on his bed, I guess, he starts writing the story for class, which is about Billy, and takes place in a graveyard. And Jennifer, we see her wake up screaming, but of course, again, Sean doesn't know. Now Billy is asleep, and the story is Billy's looking for the grave of Blind Paul, and he falls into the grave after finding the grave, and he looks around, and there's Blind Paul, who's not in the grave, and he pushes Billy into the grave. And as, of course, it's being written, Billy is dreaming this, and Billy wakes up screaming because he had the dream. And they sit down and they say, "Why you were dreaming this exact thing that was happening as I was writing it?" And they decide, yes. And then they say, it must be the typewriter. It has magical powers. This is not when they decide that the typewriter might not be a good thing to have or to use, but they do make the connection. So then, and quite the opposite, that night, Billy, I guess, is no longer there, but Sean writes himself into Jennifer's dream to explain what's happening, what happened in the previous thing. And she naturally is dreaming this, and he has the conversation with her, and then he disappears, but he says, "Call me when you wake up from this dream," because he wants to have some proof for himself. So then that's what happens. She calls him, he has his proof. At the next class, at the end, we see the teacher counting down the seconds to 3 o'clock, and she says, "Turn in your stories," which in my day at school, we'd have turned in the homework at the beginning of class and then done classwork, but, it's the end of class, it's the end of school. And Sean invites Jennifer and Billy over to his house to show. He wants to show Jennifer the story, and Billy comes too, and Jennifer sees that it is the thing that she dreamed. Billy starts reading it out loud, finding it ridiculous, and the two of them, Sean and Jennifer, then disappear into the story. So it's not just that if he's typing the story while they're sleeping, the subject dreams the story. If it is read, then they come into the story. And I'm going to take this opportunity to just say we never find out what happened to James Ellington, the author that the typewriter previously belonged to. Presumably something like this. Billy eventually realizes that they are gone, and he stops reading the story, and they reappear just as Sean is about to bite the girl, Jennifer. And it is at that point that Sean realizes, oh, the teacher's going to read the story so she can grade it, and that's going to put Billy in trouble. So they run back to the school. They run around the school looking for her, including the kitchen. We see her exercising while pulling donuts out of her pocket. It's not a good thing. And eventually, they get back to the classroom, and they've brought the typewriter with them. And again, typewriters are very heavy. But they type on the typewriter before she appears. They type on the typewriter, and the typewriter was not magic anymore, and the consequences of the things typed on the typewriter never happened, which then happens. It's kind of like the end of the Twisted Claw or the Monkey's Paw, where the wish is that no one ever wished. And it comes true. And then she appears and says, "Can I help you?" And I say, "No, everything's fine." And I wrote so much about this one that I wrote some horizontally or vertically. Kiki, oh yes, so now we're out of the story, and Kiki has disappeared but left the typewriter on that main rocky chair with a threatening message. Something about all the Midnight Society people were hunted down as they returned through the forest by the Headless Warrior, something like that. And so that's a nice more bit of theatricality. But another question that this one brings up is, is this all oral tradition, or do any of them do they write their stories down? Are they aspiring authors, or are they just kids hanging out telling scary stories? Kiki wrote one down. That is the only story that we know of the Are You Afraid of the Dark stories so far that has been written down and can be reproduced verbatim. So it just made me wonder that. I wonder if we'll get more to do with that in the future. So lest my computer run out of battery power, and I'm doing okay on time, the Dark Dragon. So it's Gary's birthday. He steps on a balloon that pops at the very beginning and says, the usual, how could you remember? How could we forget? And who is it? David. Oh, that David must be the kid whose name I couldn't remember previously. David says, "I'd like to tell a story in your honor. I'd like to borrow your character Sardo, because I know you like magic and doing stuff like this. So I'm going to tell a story." And so we established some characters here. Keith, who was in a car wreck that left him mostly looking okay, but his leg is in a bind, and he walks with a limp. We have Greg and Shelley, boyfriend and girlfriend, ostensibly, and Shelley's the pretty girl. And then we have, I must have written down her. I must have written down her name. Maybe we don't ever get her name. I just wrote her down as Nerd because she's like, it's one of those transformation into cool, from nerd to cool person thing. And I don't know if we ever get this girl's name. But I wrote her down as Nerd because she works in the library. She's got huge glasses, got her hair in a ponytail, and she's got a sweater that's too big. It's code for nerd. And, the idea, she and other nerd Keith belong together, but Keith is tempted by Shelley, who is the pretty girl. Although, the nerd will transform into a pretty girl. So it starts with him giving the nerd. I'm just going to call her the nerd because I don't. Maybe I can look up her name. No, maybe I could, but I'm not going to. Because I've spent enough time. He's giving her chocolate-covered blueberries because his dad had some extra and he knows she likes them. She asks him to the dance, but he says, "No, I'm not much of a dancer because of leg injury." Later on, when Shelley, I think she drops something and he's helping her pick the stuff up, he asks her to the dance, and she says, "Well, me and Gary are not doing too well." I think she says maybe. And then later on, we see Keith at a restaurant, and Shelley walks by. She knocks on the door, looking like she's excited to see him. But then we see Gary or Greg. Is it Gary or Greg? Gary's the... Yeah, it wouldn't be Gary. It would be Greg, because Gary's the guy from the Midnight Society. And Greg mouths, "I'm really sorry," for whatever he did. I think his crime was... I'm not that into this episode, as you can see. His crime was taking her for granted. That was his crime. And he just mouths across the restaurant, "I'm really sorry." She goes back to him. So then Kevin goes to the magic shop because he sees an ad for Sardo's magic potion that brings out the best and makes you more confident, all of that. You just use it one drop at a time. He goes to Sardo, and tests the potion on a rabbit before he leaves. And then the rabbit, which was looking kind of grungy, gets all nice and sleek and clean, and then Keith leaves, and then the rabbit is revealed to be a monster rabbit. That is the ultimate result of the potion. So he goes home, and he takes a drop, and he becomes the Fonz. Blue jeans, white t-shirt, leather jacket, he's the Fonz. And he refers to himself as KC. He goes to the restaurant, he flirts with Shelley, says he's Keith's cousin, and then he wakes up the next day normal, except he has some markings on his chest that are a little freaky. Then the nerd starts asking questions, because she can tell, because she actually cares about him, that he's not at his best. He fails a test in class, which we find out about in a conversation with his dad. And then he gets all moody and he leaves. I guess the car crash killed his mother. That might be the thing. And then he leaves because his dad brings it up and says, "I can take care of you," that sort of thing that parents do. Then he throws the potion out, but then Shelley calls looking for KC, and then he adopts a KC-like voice, and then takes the potion back out. And because she says, "Greg didn't ask, so I'd like to go to the dance with you." He takes the potion back out. And this is where KC asks Shelley to the dance. This time, he transforms, he goes to her house, I guess, to hang out with her there. And then after that, Casey asks her to the dance. And then he wakes up and he's got fangs and he's got a little beard. Goes to Sardo to try to figure out what's going on. And the nerd starts investigating. And then Sardo is looking through his magic book, and he sees, it's all fine. It's all on this page, and it's all fine. It should be working the way it says. And then Keith points, "Well, what about that where it says, caution, turn to the next page?" They turn to the next page, and it turns out first you have to fight the dark dragon before it brings out the best. You have to fight the dark dragon, which would seem to be his inner demon that's coming out of him in the form of the fangs and the beard. Later on, we see him looking rather like Emperor Palpatine from the Star Wars movies. The nerd is on the trail. She's finding things out. And then she sees him take the little bit of potion right before going into the dance, and then transform, and then he goes into the dance, starts dancing with Shelley. So the nerd, who is very good at picking locks and finding keys to get into places, she breaks into his house at one point, and then she talks to him from the other side of his bedroom door. He won't let her see his fangs and fur, but he's skipped school, so she's worried. And then she just breaks into his locker somehow, and she gets the potion. She takes all the rest. She transforms into the pretty version of herself, and she says, and then in the meantime, they pass out the Best Athlete Award, and it goes to Greg, and he uses his speech to win Shelley back, and she leaves KC, and that is when the pretty nerd arrives. But I guess the school's fallen on hard times. They don't have the budget for an assembly for the sports awards, but I guess, or maybe that just happens at homecoming dances. I'm not I don't know what's happening now at schools and school dances and sports, and I don't know what was happening in the early 90s with high school dances and sports, but it seemed strange to me based on my experience from the late 90s and the early 2000s. So her name is Raya. We do eventually find out her name is Raya. I prefer nerd. She says that she wanted to transform because then he could love her if she was a pretty girl. And then they are both turn back, and that the Dark Dragon is defeated. It turns out the Dark Dragon was, I don't know, not feeling confident, or it's unclear. It's not the best episode, but they both turn back into the nerdy people that they are, not the good-looking, classically good-looking people, but just the nerdy people. And I'm just going to leave it at that. It was a nice birthday present for Gary, I guess. But again, so on Wednesday night, I will watch The Whispering Wall, The Tale of the Whispering Walls, The Tale of the Frozen Ghost, and The Tale of the Full Moon. I love The Tale of the Frozen Ghost. I have no memory of The Whispering Walls or The Full Moon, but I'm not reading the synopses, so maybe I'm actually familiar with them, just not their titles. Sweet dreams, everyone, and please watch the video that's either here or here, titled Beautiful Will of an Insane Man.